So when you're dealing in a high-risk business and spaceflight is risky, that's what you do. You buy down that risk, you make it as safe as possible, and of course, that is the whole reason for this test flight, to stress it and to test it to make sure it's as safe as possible when Artemis 2, when we put humans in the spacecraft.
Greetings! The Space Launch System rocket wasn't ready to fly today. Disappointing, but hardly surprising under the circumstances. The eventful countdown, marked by weather delays and several hardware issues, was scrubbed by Artemis Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson at 8:34 a.m. this morning while the clock was holding at T-minus 40 minutes. A lightning storm delayed the start of tanking operations until 1:20 a.m. Around 3:40 a.m. during the transition from liquid hydrogen slow fill to fast fill, a spike in hydrogen gas concentrations related to the 8-inch disconnect inside the purge can occurred. The reading of 1.8% was less than the 4% upper limit. Controllers reversed the hydrogen flow and implemented a procedure to ensure that both sides of the leaky disconnect were at cryogenic temperatures. This succeeded in sealing the leak, and regular tanking operations resumed. Approaching 6:30 a.m., two issues cropped up, one of which would ultimately stop the count. The first involved an apparent crack on the inner tank flange, which developed a frost line. After engineering analysis, it was determined that air was entering cracked thermal protection insulation and freezing, causing the frost line. Thus, controllers were reassured that there was no crack in the structure, and the issue was resolved. The second issue was the failure to thermally condition all four RS-25 main engines in the core stage. In particular, Engine 3 could not be brought to an acceptable chill-down temperature through the hydrogen bleed process. The chill-down procedure increases pressure on the core stage tank to bleed some of the propellant through the engines. These engines cannot be started unless they are within the proper super-cold temperature range. By this point, there was no possibility of launching at the opening of the window, and the clock was held at T-minus 40 minutes. The team tried closing the valves to the other three engines in hope of forcing the bleed into Engine 3, but that procedure and other troubleshooting steps were unsuccessful. In the 8 o'clock hour, a storm approached the Cape, and weather conditions turned red. The mission management team called for a scrub at around the time of the planned window opening. A briefing was conducted at 1 p.m. this afternoon. Officials could offer little in the way of solid information about the cause of the problem or its potential resolution, noting that the control team was tired and needed to review all data before anything conclusive could be determined. Observers had earlier speculated that Engine 3 was responsible for the problem and thus would require changeout. But NASA reported that they did not believe the issue was inside the engine. Rather, they think that something in the core stage is causing the problem, since the temperature of the other engines, although trending towards acceptable levels, was also less responsive than expected. An additional hardware anomaly was disclosed. The hydrogen vent valve in the bleed system was bulky and may have played some role in the failure of contingency procedures to resolve the issue. The 4-inch disconnect in the bleed system, which leaked during the last wet dress rehearsal countdown, operated fine today. However, its failure in the wet dress rehearsal prevented an exercise of the bleed system prior to launch, and officials had said in pre-launch briefings that it was a point of concern. With so many unanswered questions, the possibility of a launch attempt on Friday afternoon remains open, as does a rollback to the VAB for troubleshooting and repair. Officials will gather again Tuesday afternoon to assess the path forward, with a briefing set for no earlier than 6 p.m. Eastern. WSN is planning to upload a special report with a summary version of the entire countdown, with every word spoken by Artemis launch commentator Daryl Nail. The entire sequence, which lasted over 8 hours, has been condensed to just over 2 hours by eliminating quiet periods. And here are excerpts of the post-scrub NASA briefing.
Right around that same time frame, the team encountered an issue with the verification of the Orion flight software. It took about 11 minutes to have a command acknowledged to help verify the flight software, and it was a simple misconfiguration. One of the command and control modules was not activated, and the team quickly resolved that. And then once they configured it, they quickly worked through the software verification, and there were no concerns at that point with the Orion software verification. The tanking meeting itself was very clean. We were done in 30 minutes, and we gave the go for tanking. Shortly thereafter, the Kennedy Space Center went into a lightning alert, and the tanking was delayed for about an hour. And then once the cryo loading started, we started the loading of the hydrogen. The team quickly encountered a hydrogen leak at the 8-inch quick disconnect, which is our fill and drain, and that happened when they went into the fast fill phase. So they had to slow down the loading operation. They chilled down that interface, and they managed to work their way through the full cryo loading operation of both the core stage as well as the upper stage successfully. Once we got through the propellant loading on the rocket, both the core stage and the upper stage, they started the engine bleed. We talked at our flight readiness review about the engine bleed. We knew that that was a risk headed into this launch campaign, and it would be the first time demonstrating that successfully. We did encounter an issue chilling down engine number 3. We need the engine to be at the cryogenically cool temperature such that when it starts, it's not shocked with all the cold fuel that flows through it. So we needed a little extra time to assess that. When the team started working through that, they also saw an issue with a vent valve at the inner tank. So the combination of not being able to get the engine 3 chilled down, and then the vent valve issue that they saw at the inner tank really caused us to pause today, and we felt like we needed a little more time. There was also a series of weather issues throughout the window. We would have been no-go for weather at the beginning of the window due to precipitation, and later on in the window we would have been no-go for lightning within the launch pad area. So, for example, we had 42 collision avoidance cutouts that we had to manage over the course of the 2-hour window. Most of those were only a couple of seconds long, but there were a few that were about a minute long. You know, when you start thinking about the type of mission that we're flying, it really helps you understand just how unique and how complex the Space Launch System is, and the Orion and the Artemis program is. We have this upper stage, the interim cryo propulsion stage, that lofts the spacecraft to a 975 nautical mile insertion orbit along with the SLS core stage. And with that, we need the performance from it, but we fly through part of the orbital debris field, the micrometeoroid and orbital debris field. And then one orbit later, we commit to the point of translunar injection. So as we fly up through this orbital debris and then back down to low Earth orbit and then out through the point of translunar injection, we have to know where all these objects are, and that explains those 42 cutouts. And that is something that our operations teams were prepared to do today. We just didn't get to the launch window. So
it was a really important attempt for us. We talked about that after Wet Dress 4. There were a lot of questions of, you know, should we have rolled back, tried to do another test? We felt and still feel like going for today was the right thing to do. And that comes in a few ways. Our launch team was really, I'll say, pushed today. They were working a lot of issues. They were looking at the compressed timeline with that hold at the beginning, and we were filling all 4 tanks at the same time at one point, really pushing our team through a timeline. Weather, Mike talked about some of the weather. We talked about lightning. Weather was coming in and out. We were actually not able to go at the beginning of the window like we thought. There was a lot of comms from the launch weather officer. The hydrogen out of spec that Mike talked about when we went to manual control, that's something we did on the locks when we had some issues loading locks the first time. Going to that manual control to me is learning. And getting through the first hydrogen leak that we had, that was the same leak we had on the same line to the same level. And when we started to do the manual fast fill, honestly, it kept climbing, and I thought there's no way we're going to get out of this, and that got us out of it. So to me, what we pushed the team through, and I know we always get a lot of talking about the team too much, but we continue to learn. That's what we're doing. We're testing, I think Bob Cabana said it, we're testing the people and the processes. So we've put ourselves through a compressed timeline. We're going to get some shorter launch windows we'll have to deal with, where these skills will help us.
Yeah, Friday is definitely in play. We just need a little bit of time to look at the data, but the team is setting up for a 96-hour recycle. So they're still holding in the launch countdown configuration, and we're preserving the option for Friday. They're replenishing the commodities out at Launch Complex 39B. You'll see some of those activities tomorrow. And right now, the indications don't point to an engine problem. It's in the bleed system, the thermally conditions the engines. We did change the diameter of that from Stennis, where we did the green run testing, to here, and we never fully got into the engine bleed configuration through the prior wet dress attempts. And again, that was something that we talked about at the agency flight readiness review as a known risk to our launch campaign. And at that time, we said we would not launch unless we got through the demonstration of our ability to thermally condition the engines. We need that in order to start the engines and run them successfully. So we just didn't get there today. And we're still trying to understand what happened with the intertank vent, but it was clear that there was a leak at that vent valve. And the challenge that created was we want to increase the pressure in the tank in order to establish the hydrogen bleed, and the vent valve wasn't cooperating with us. So it was this delicate balance of maintaining the pressure to establish the bleed on all four engines, and engine 3 was not seeing the temperatures that it needed, and the vent valve complicated that. And that's at the point where the team decided that it was appropriate to declare the scrub, because we just weren't going to make the 2-hour window. And then it just was one of those situations where we just knew that we needed more time.
And that's the way space is today. Until tomorrow, add in Explorata, and thanks for watching.